everybody, I'm Chris.
I'm Adrian.
And I'm Jimmy.
Welcome to Worldview Finder, episode 48, everybody. It's episode 48. It's a pause. People were anticipating what I was gonna say. Episode 48. So yeah, today. Is there ever a situation where it's okay to kill your parents?
Jeez. It's aggressive.
Adrian wanted to talk about that. Turtles on the Run. We'll talk about that. Crazy turtle story. The craziest true story Jimmy heard this week.
It's pretty crazy.
He hears a crazy story every week, but this is
our
the
live
craziest
reaction
one.
to it.
Our live,
So
we haven't heard it. We don't know
not
what it
heard
is. But first, what would you do to get ahead? If you knew I had to get ahead to get some money,
I thought you were going to do what would you do for a Klondike bar?
what would you do for a Pop-Tart?
Yeah, substitute for a Pop-Tart. Start that over.
Okay. And, but first, what would you do for a Pop-Tart bar?
Incredible.
That was great. I was waiting for that.
We'll keep it in there. All right. Yeah, so I watched the Seinfeld movie on Netflix, Unfrosted. So
It's interesting.
Here's the great thing about Seinfeld is he knows how to do things. And
Nice.
Wow, that's good.
Well, no, because behind the scenes, he did not get permission from Pop-Tarts or from Kellogg's or Post about any of the product stuff, which I guess you can do that. I don't know if that's allowed. I don't know. I don't know what the rules are.
I don't know what the rules are either.
For that. But then Kellogg's went with it and they're like, oh, okay. Because they said they found out about the movie when everybody else did. So if you don't know anything about this movie, it's about the story of how Pop-Tarts came to be Pop-Tarts.
But it's an untrue story.
Oh, it's completely untrue. Yeah. So,
okay.
So it's basically false. Seinfeld telling this kid in a diner, like, hey, here's what happened in the 60s or whatever, the 50s or the 60s about like Kellogg's and Post. So, because they're like the main cereal companies. And so they're like in competition. And so it's how they overcame like how do we get breakfast pastries to get people and stuff? So it's just how Pop-Tart became invented. So, but apparently like Kellogg's was like, well, let's do something. And they basically made ads saying, well, Seinfeld didn't get permission, so we're not going to get permission from him. And then they had like some of the old characters from Seinfeld show would like act out a scene or something.
That's funny.
And then they had Seinfeld like in the Pop-Tart costume. There's just different things that they did to kind of advertise for them, but also it was advertisement for the movie, so it worked out for Seinfeld. Like it was just interesting. And I don't know, because I know with was it FedEx in Castaway?
Oh, yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so in Castaway, they had the FedEx box, and I think FedEx had it wasn't UPS, right? It was FedEx.
I'm pretty sure, it was.
I have not seen this movie.
You haven't seen Castaway with Tom Hanks?
Nope.
Wow.
With the volleyball?
Wilson. Man. I guess Adrian hates film. But in it, but FedEx had a very like, oh, no, this is what you can do with our product and all this stuff. And a lot of brands do that. And so it was interesting that Kellogg's didn't have any say in this, or Post, because Post is kind of the bad guys in this. So, but it's kind of, the whole thing is we have to beat out this other company because we need more market shares and we need more people to buy our stuff so we can make more money and that kind of thing. And so it's about consumerism and just kind of, again, fictional, but like behind the scenes of like, because all the mascots were and it's all very tongue in cheek and very funny because Tony the Tiger they're trying to come up with a good catchphrase or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, they're great," and he's like, "That's it, that's the catchphrase," and all this stuff. And just how they came about that. And then there's a scene actually where do we spoil some stuff or
spoiler alert?
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert if you're gonna watch Unfrosted, but Mad Men like are in there because they're trying to like advertise for their new thing, and so they bring in the John Hamm from Mad Men and the other guy that's in that show from like the old advertising.
It's just like a cameo of him.
Yeah, because it takes place. But there's so many cameos. I mean, just people walk by and like bring papers and like, oh, that's that guy, and then just all these different things. So. Yeah, but it's very funny at parts, and then other times I'm like, it's good overall, but they say GD a lot in it.
Interesting.
Not a ton, but it's just enough that it's like, why? Like it just like I don't know that swear sticks out to me more than most. I don't know. It's just because.
So what is like besides consumerism? Is there like almost like a meta worldview? Because it's like, okay, yeah, Kellogg's like Pop-Tarts versus what's Post representing? Are they trying
Country Squares is what they came out with.
Country Squares. Well,
was that true?
I don't know. I tried to look up some of this stuff. I couldn't.
Country Squares. No wonder Pop-Tarts won.
Yeah, well, that's what they said. They're like, and they called it like Trat Pop, and then this guy was playing with Silly Putty, and he like poked it down, and then he like read it, and he's like, oh, they have Pop-Tarts, and then they're like, what? And they're like, we gotta change everything. He said it on the news. So, yeah, so
it is totally fake though. So it's
anyway, so that's like there's that going on, but then if he's telling this story to the boy and like is there and all these cameos, it's like what are they trying to? It seems like they're trying to accomplish more than just like making a funny movie about that.
Yeah, so Seinfeld kind of says that movies, like the film industry, is gone. Like he's like with all the stuff that's happened, and he's even said some stuff about comedy. He's like wokeism kind of killed comedy because he's like you can't joke about some of the harder things anymore because that's what comedy would always take the hard things in life and kind of not make fun of them, but like put them in a different light, in a humorous light, but it would make you think about issues that were actually deeper. And there are some comedians that are just out there being goofy, but you do have some that do have like biting commentary on what's going on, but they say it in a way that like makes you laugh and think and all this stuff. And so Seinfeld's kind of saying like, we can't do that anymore because people get offended about everything. And so you get canceled for saying something about whatever. And so he's kind of like, well, let's just make this movie and we'll make it funny and all this stuff. And so for the most part, I mean, there's a few cuss words and there's some like innuendos, if you will, at times. But like for the most part, because Jim Gaffigan's kind of the lead. I mean, Seinfeld's the lead, but then there's Jim Gaffigan in there as well. And there's just, I mean, there's so many comedians and just different things. And it just kind of parodies a lot of, so they do parody the January 6th attack on the White House, the Capitol or whatever, like the mascots revolt and kind of thing. But they it's very much like you can tell like, oh, this is supposed to be the January 6th thing. But I've heard like, oh, they're making this political statement stuff, but like almost in the movie they're like, no, these people were right because they were the mascots and they were kind of carrying the brand and they weren't being treated fairly and stuff. And so you're like, well, they're also, I mean, they're poking fun of it, but at the same time they're not saying like, oh, these people are the worst. Like they're just basically like, oh, these people are doing like protesting. They're protesting because they felt wronged or whatever. But so I think it's kind of like, hey, can we bring comedy back and can we be funny and can we kind of poke fun at some things? And there are like because sometimes in comedies they just kill people randomly in funny ways. So that does happen in this. Like a guy blows up.
Jeez. In a Pop-Tart movie?
It's gross.
That's actually a great segue to the Willoughbys.
The Willoughbys.
That's also Netflix. But it actually, the comments on it or like the feedback that it's gotten is very similar to what you're talking about. Is it okay to joke about these hard things or like to make light of hard situations? And it reminded me, the movie itself reminded me of like kind of Tim Burton, James and the Giant Peach, like Roald Dahl, where it's like kids are in these kind of abusive, terrible situations, but it's kind of, where it's kind of like brushed over with more of a dark humor, comedic scenario. So that's where this movie comes from. And it's these three kids who are
you said
four kids.
It's called the Willoughbys?
Yeah.
The Willoughbys.
So it's a boy and a girl and two twins.
So this is is it okay to kill your parents?
Yes.
Segment that we had talked about.
They are completely ignored by their parents. And so they decide like if they become orphans or like with no parents, then they can kind of reestablish themselves as they come from a great long line of Willoughbys that are great people, and they're like,
but their parents weren't great people,
right? Okay. So the oldest boy is like, I'm gonna take back my family name, so that way we have to get rid of the bad Willoughbys. Oh. So they send their parents on this treacherous vacation, like in the hopes that they'll die. And so then they become like orphans. They're in their home by themselves. But then a lady comes because she's like, well, your parents did assign me as like your nanny. And so then it becomes like a little bit of a Mary Poppins, like found family type of scenario.
Okay.
Because the nanny is supposed to be like the worst, and that's why they hired her, because she was the cheapest. But she ends up being like what they needed the whole time.
Who hired the
parents when they left? They were like, you got to have a nanny, but they hired like the cheapest.
So they don't actually murder their parents. They just send them on a trip.
A murderous vacation.
A murderous vacation in hopes that they die.
Okay.
We didn't kill them. We just hoped they died.
Yeah,
That's a little bit different.
That's true.
And true. And they do end up going and realizing like, they go to save them at one point when they realize they are going to die.
Oh.
So.
Spoiler.
Yeah, no. But then, so it is like, it's kind of a found family, but then there's also like CPS in there. It's called like Orphan Services. And they are very like Men in Black type of people that seem very scary and harsh.
Yeah.
But in the actual dialogue from them, it does seem like they have the kids' best interest at heart. But then they go to foster families, the kids do, and they're represented in not a great light, where it's like one kid is only on his screen the whole time. Like they're just become glued to the TV. Another family's like hippie weirdos, you know, like granola crunchy people. And so, and then the other kid like escapes from all of them and runs away. So I guess some of the negative feedback was like foster families are seen as these kind of villains or like stupid in this scenario, and CPS as well. And so but like one person commented that they are foster family, and the foster boy who watched it, he wrote a letter to the Netflix, like the creators, because he was so thankful to have a movie that he related to.
Interesting.
And that he felt seen.
Yeah. And sometimes perception is reality. I think it was
Sir Francis Bacon.
Sir Francis Bacon. That was it. But in the Willoughbys, I don't know how, but maybe the kids like just see the bad in their situation. And I don't know if but I mean, the situations are really bad, or it's just like.
No, they are really bad. Oh, yeah. Okay. And the kids don't actually, they're like miserable, but in like no, you should actually, if this were real life, this would be horrific for you. But they're just like, listen, our parents on vacation, so then we can become orphans, you know, like just kind of flippant about it.
Is it a British film?
No.
Okay, because I always thought they had British accents. I haven't seen it.
But you thought they had British accents.
Terry Crews is a character.
Terry Crews.
Like Maya Rudolph. There's like a pretty big cast.
Yeah, I like Terry Crews.
So the question is, if you are in a bad situation, if you can't kill your parents, can you at least send them on a murderous vacation? Is that okay?
No, like, so the worldview, I think the worldview that the movie itself is pushing is, it's not your like flesh and blood family that makes it a family. It's acceptance and like who's your family. And that seems like a very popular worldview right now. It's like you kind of make your own family, because it's the people who love and care about you, which can be true and good and healthy, but it also could be twisted into a like, okay, well, I'm going to cancel you as my family because I'm not going to try and work hard.
Yeah. Right. Because sometimes, I mean, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one that I think of where there's a girl going through a situation where she talks to her parents, and one of the parents doesn't agree with her lifestyle choices and like basically won't talk to her. And they always have game night, or her family does, or whatever. So the 9-9 crew shows up and like, well, we're going to be your family and all this stuff. But she doesn't try to, she's basically like, well, my mom's the worst and all this stuff. And they don't, eventually they do work it out and all this stuff, but it's not, it's almost like, well, if you don't agree with what I'm doing, then you're the bad person. Like, well, you just told me this and I didn't understand what you were going through, and now I don't agree with you, but I've got to take time to process this. But it's like, you don't accept me right now, so I have my family as my coworkers and all that stuff. And so
right, and these kids, like I said, kind of towards the end, they go and they end up saving their parents, and their parents are like, oh, maybe we could. And it's supposed to be like the kids are hopeful that their parents are going to change. And then they like run past them basically and are still ignoring them. And they still leave and fly off. So it's like the kids, it wasn't for lack of trying in this scenario.
Right. Okay.
but they didn't put a big emphasis on trying or not trying or anything like that. But it was just more like hey, the people who love and care for you are your family, even if they're not, you're born, the family you're born into.
You're Jason born into. So, but yeah, so because our neighbors foster kids, and I have friends that foster kids and all that stuff, and so I know there can be good things, but I also know some situations that kids were fostered that were bad, and so you would hope that they would have portrayed like both sides of it, like that there are, but that's true with anything. Like, I mean, there's good and bad,
right? And then going back to the Unfrosted is like, have these hard situations become too taboo or like wokeism? Can we not have movies? Because like I was mentioning before, like Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, they come from abusive families, and it's like a kid's movie to kind of help the kids cope without addressing super like deep issues.
Yeah, Wonka was a little bit like the new Wonka. Yeah, because he's in a bad situation and doesn't know how to get out of it, and he doesn't try to murder them, but he tries to make chocolate out of them. So, so you're saying, like, does it help kids in tough situations deal with some things?
Yeah, or just kind of shed it on a different light.
Yeah. Or does it make light of this thing so people are like, they'll get over it eventually?
Well, you said the one person he wrote in a letter and said, hey, I really appreciated this movie because I could relate to it. So I saw part of my story, even if it wasn't the exact picture, I saw part of my story in this movie, and I was able to relate to that.
Yeah. So, and it might be like a situation where the adults or people and the parents in foster care are like, great, now I look like a terrible person. But the kid's like, it's not about that. It's just more about feeling the whole experience, feeling seen.
Yeah. And if we put that through a Christ-centered worldview, I mean, Jesus is very much about building community, because even there's a point where his mom and brothers come to him and they're like, hey, I think you're doing the wrong thing. And they don't understand what Jesus is doing. And people are like, hey, your mother and brothers are outside. And he's like, who are my mom and brothers? But those that do my will and follow after me. And you're like, oh. So it's almost like his found family is it. And so you kind of have that, but it's like this following of Christ in community is where we find our family. Like it's, I mean, we talk about people as brothers and sisters in Christ. And so like God himself sets that up as like, this is your family. This is who the people you're supposed to be around. And those are to encourage us. And when there are bad situations where kids need foster care, need CPS, or need help, we are to be the church and help them in those situations. And so I think that's why sometimes maybe those situations are corrupt, because when you have people that don't follow Christ that are in those systems, because I know people that foster people just to get the money.
Right.
Like, that's not a great situation. And so,
it's true.
So trying to so as followers of Jesus, we should be helping those that are in need and those that are hurting and that kind of thing. And I think, I mean, the humor thing is, I don't know if that's a biblical thing, like, hey, we'll make fun of stuff to bring light to it or whatever. But I think there is something about helping people to understand and put things in a way that they can understand what's happening around them. And
I think with the comedy thing too, it's more of, can we have a conversation about this regardless of what it is? Because for some people it's like, okay, if we don't see eye to eye on this situation, on this particular idea, then we're going to break that relationship and we're just not going to associate with each other. So, but either joking about it or just having conversations, I think it's important to be able to have people that you disagree with, but still be able to have a relationship with them and talk about those things.
Yeah. Good point.
Good point.
So,
speaking of good points,
Adrian, you
speaking
have
of
this
found family.
Oh, okay.
Florida Foibles.
Yeah, so it's a quick one, but it is found family. So
literally, that was pretty good.
So some cops pulled over to help a turtle cross the street.
Is this a setup for a joke?
Yeah. Why'd the turtle cross the road, trying to get home, and found out that this turtle was a family pet that had been missing for 4 years.
Oh.
It went missing in 2020. and it's like an African something turtle, so it's not native to the area, so the policemen were suspicious, so that's why they put it.
But you said
it on Facebook.
They responded well to head pats. How did they know?
I don't know. That was very strange. They were like, we knew it was domesticated because it responded well to head pats. Like, if I
that police officer took out his baton
and this turtle was big. It took two officers to like lift it.
Turtles get big.
Yeah. But I'm like, if I found this giant turtle, I'm not getting anywhere near its head. Because those snapping turtles can break your fingers off. So I'm like, why were they like, I'm just going to pat your little head?
They were turtle people.
Fortunately for them, they responded well. Hey,
did you guys, what was like, I forget what the name of the show was, but the main character was Turtle Man. Do you remember Turtle Man?
No.
The Ninja Turtles?
No. So Turtle Man, he was like this super country guy, but his show was like he would go out and remove animals that weren't supposed to be there and stuff, but he was like, he didn't really have like any equipment. He would like just jump in the lake and just grab the turtle. Oh, I vaguely remember that now.
I vaguely remember that show. And there's a great scene in UHF where he's like, turtles are nature's suction cup, and he licks it and throws the turtle and sticks to the ceiling.
That is weird.
That's very weird.
But, so and then like, because when you pet a dog, like it wags its tail, and like, oh, he's responding well to this pat. But like, what does a turtle do to respond well to something? Like, you pat its head, and he's like, "Thank you, officer."
He just slowly bobs his head back and forth and smiles.
He smiles and sticks his tongue out. I don't know. Yeah, he purrs. It's like, what do turtles do to show happy emotion?
Well, maybe it's just that he didn't go inside his shell.
Yeah,
it wasn't like,
Well, if it's a tortoise, they can't go inside their shells.
Really?
Well,
I don't know. Can tortoises go in shells?
Oh, gosh. Why did we just bring that up?
But so these officers helped this turtle find its family.
They were there to burgle their turtles.
But here's what I want to know. Yeah. 4 years, what was this turtle up to?
Just walking around.
I don't know. That's what they were saying. They were like, it went through some harsh winters, but it was okay.
So those things last forever, though.
Yeah, they do. But can you just imagine, like, being out for 4 years in the wild? And then now it's being back in captivity, poor thing.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing, because people are like, well, if you have a pet and you just let it go, it's not going to survive.
Like turtle. Jimmy's hamsters.
Like my hamster. My hamster is probably going to be, it was found somewhere in Florida.
The size of a guinea pig now.
It responded well to head pats.
It didn't bite fingers anymore.
That's true, see? If that turtle's doing well, I'm sure my hamster is too.
So that turtle, he's everybody's hope.
It is a crazy
story.
For
all the parents that have let animals go because their kids don't take care of them.
Well, if you love something, set it free, and if it comes back, then it
was meant to be.
Something like that.
It's a good little rhyme.
Because I think the actual ending of it is, if it doesn't come back, then it wasn't yours in the first place, or something like that.
Yeah,
you've heard the thing. You know the thing.
You know the thing. That's why, like,
that's putting a lot of emotional responsibility on an animal.
Well,
that's how Jimmy, most of his relationships, he would break up with the girl. Like, if they come back to me, then it was meant to be.
That's true. That's called playing hard to get.
I really like this one. I hope she comes back. He's like, well, you said mean things.
Okay, Jimmy, I want to hear the story.
Okay,
now
what is the story?
It's time for Jimmy's craziest true story that you heard this week.
Okay, so you guys can get your popcorn ready, because this is going to be a doozy.
Oh man, I'm ready.
Oh, whoa. What? Oh, he's getting the phone.
I have notes here. This is kind of an involved story. So I have some notes of.
Whoa. Okay, buckle up. We're going to be here a long
buckle
time.
Up.
Apparently.
At least an hour.
This is why we zoomed through this episode.
Pages of his stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of context, so there is this former Navy SEAL who started a YouTube channel where he tells stories, and he was on a podcast that I listen to a lot, and so he tells story live. Most of the stories that he tells are true stories, so this was actually a true story. So it's going to be a little crazy. I'll just jump right in. So we have, the year, to paint the picture, the year is 2004, and we have Mitch, who's kind of the main character of the story, and then he's a senior in college in Louisiana.
Okay.
And there was this girl named Kayla also in college, and Mitch kind of likes her. He wants to date her, but she's kind of playing hard to get, like we were talking about, so never really gives them the time of day. But then one day, they finally go out on a date, and they like really hit it off. And then from that, they end up graduating and getting married the next year. And then it's
I don't know where this is going, I think. But
oh, really? Okay.
How do you know?
I don't know.
That was quick. I would be surprised if you did.
Okay.
So they hit it off. They're married. They kind of have kind of like the dream life. Like they have the house, the white picket fence. So this is right around 2006, so 2 years later. So they bought their dream house. They have their first kid in 2007. That's their daughter. And then in 2009, fast forward, they have their first son. So like I said, and they are kind of like the ideal family where they have family game nights all the time. Mitch and Kayla, they always prioritize their relationship. Like they go on date nights, all this stuff. So it's really, they're all around having a good time. So in this is where the story kind of really starts. So that's kind of the background. So in 2009, so Mitch is watching football on TV, as you do. And so he was watching football, but out of the corner of his eye, they had a lamp in the living room. And out of the corner of his eye, the lamp looked blurry. And he's like, that's kind of weird, because like it was only the bottom of the lamp that was blurry, and everything else around it was in focus, because Mitch has pretty good eyesight. So he just looked back at the game and looked back over there. He's like, this is kind of weird. Like, and then finally he's like, okay, this is really weird. So he got up, walked over there, and he was like touching it and everything. And the bottom of the lamp is still blurry. Like it's just out of focus. It doesn't make any sense at all. So it's out of focus.
What?
And so he's like kind of freaking out. He's like, is like something wrong with me? Like, should I call a doctor or like what? But typical guy, he's like, what, just don't worry about it.
Nothing else is blurry except the bottom of the lamp.
Only the bottom of the lamp.
The Matrix.
So it gets a little bit stranger. So he's sitting there, and then he looks over again, and not only is the lamp blurry, but it's also upside down now.
Oh, what?
So, and then he's like, okay, this is like not okay. This is like so weird.
Wait, the whole lamp's upside down or just that bottom
part? So the lamp is upside down.
Okay.
So, and then a little while later, Kayla and then the two kids get home, and Mitch is like, I feel like I should tell them. But the weird thing is they don't actually see it. Like they don't say anything about it. So he's like I'm nervous, like something is wrong, but I don't want to do anything. So he goes through, and it's nighttime, so him and Kayla go to bed, and he's just laying there, just like can't sleep, because that's all he's thinking about is that lamp. So finally, after a while in the night, not being able to sleep, he goes down, and he's like, I got to look at that lamp again. So he sits there on the couch, like staring at the lamp all night, because he cannot. He's like blowing his mind.
Is it still upside down?
It's still upside down, okay. Still blurry. And so Kayla, the next day, so it's all the way through the night, gets up in the morning, sees him on the couch, and she's like, what are you doing? And he kind of snaps out of it because he was like dialed in on this lamp.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I wasn't really feeling well last night, and I just came down here, and I'm also not really feeling good. I don't think I can go to work today. And she's like, you've never called off work, and you don't really seem sick. But he's like, well, I'm just not feeling it. So
he's not like, hey, do you see this lamp?
He still down? Has not mentioned it.
Why not?
I don't know why he's not mentioning it.
Mitch. Okay.
So he's doing this, and so he ends up staying at home that day, and literally all day he's just staring at this lamp. At this point, he's like in a trance. Like he is like so dialed in to the point where his wife and his kids get home after work, and Kayla tries to get his attention, and he's like out of it. Like he's not even responding anymore.
Okay.
So then Kayla's like, okay, something is not right, because like she's calling his name and stuff, and then she's getting kind of nervous. So she like tells the kids to go upstairs and play up there. And then she's like, okay, well, I need to call the doctor because like something is not right. And then from Mitch's perspective, not only is the lamp blurry, but now it's slowly getting bigger, to the point where it's like all he can see. And at this point, he's lost the ability to like hear anything else. So this lamp is like all that he sees. So
what?
So Mitch is, so it's getting a little bit weird. And then where it gets even a little bit weirder is he starts having like this intense pain in his head. And then the room kind of goes black where he can't see anything anymore. Oh, okay. And then he hears people yelling. So it's all black. He hears people yelling, and then he opens his eyes, and he's not in his house anymore. He's looking up, and it's like in the middle of the day, and there's people all around him yelling, and he's very confused. It looks like there's college students around him. He's like on the floor, and then he's like looking for his wife and kids because he's not in his house anymore. He's like yelling their names, looking for them. And then out of the crowd, a police officer, like we were talking about earlier, runs to the crowd and picks him up and takes him to the police car. And like he's freaking out because he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know where his wife and kids are. So the entire time that they're in the car, he's like telling this police officer, like, where are my wife and kids? Like, I'm freaking out. What's happening? While this intense pain is still going on in his head. And the police officer said, look, you fell, you hit your head. We're taking you to the hospital. And so they get to the hospital, and he's getting treated. And then he figures out what actually happened because they tell him what happened. And he said, whew. This is a long story, but it's good. So he said,
I'm in.
Yes. So he's getting treated. So what actually happened was Mitch was a senior, and he got tackled in football, hit his head on the ground, and went unconscious for 10 seconds. And in that 10 seconds, his brain like came up with an entire life.
What?
And like 4 or 5 years?
Yes. So years of this, and that happened in that 10 seconds, and he woke up. And so then he realized what happened, and he is like kind of mourning the loss of his wife and kids because this was a figment of his imagination.
My goodness.
Yeah, that was more than 4 or 5 years. That was like...
Yeah, because they got married, they bought the white picket fence, they had kids, so he's waking up and realizing that never actually happened, that he just got hit and his brain did all this. So to this day, he said this is like totally wrecked his life. Like he's had to go to therapy now. Because he's like, how do you deal with something like that where you have this wife and kids that didn't actually exist?
For 10 seconds, that was it?
Yeah. So he was unconscious for 10 seconds, and his brain came up with all of that. And he said now he still has dreams where he can see his son running around the corner. And he's like this. So, because this guy actually found him, and he had like a Ask Me Anything on Reddit where people ask him questions and stuff. But yeah, like he's going to therapy and stuff like that.
So did he marry Kayla?
So I don't know what happened afterwards.
You don't know?
Yeah, but yeah. So the whole thing that's, like I said, is kind of wrecked his life. Is it's like, how do you? Because the people you're talking to, it's so hard to empathize with something like that. It's like you're mourning the loss of people that never actually existed, but to you, it was very real. And so what do you do with that? And so it was an absolutely crazy story. And I was even more mind blown that it was a true story too.
I thought you were going to say they were brother and sister long lost.
Oh, gosh.
That's what I thought was going
No.
No, he was unconscious.
He's unconscious the whole time.
Yeah, so he was unconscious for 10 seconds, and then his brain came up with that whole kind of idea to cope with being unconscious. And
for such a short amount of time.
Yeah, for like 10 seconds. Which I can...
So... Yeah, I'm like, how does your brain work so fast that it can, expedite? It can give you how many years? Like 4 to 8 years?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of like, when you dream, because some people, they only remember kind of snapshots of dreams, but some people will dream for hours and hours and hours, and that might be only 30 seconds in your actual brain. So
have you ever had like a
lucid dream?
A dream? No, not a lucid dream, but like where you fall asleep and like you have this dream and it's like this long ordeal, and you wake up and it's only been like 30 minutes. Or like if you took a nap or something, you're like, oh man, that felt like a really long time. So in his brain, I mean, it might not have been all those years, but it just felt like, because it could have been like a dream state where you're like, oh, I mean, time could have jumped forward and all this stuff, but the lamp thing is weird.
Yeah.
The lamp thing is really weird.
And that's
freaking me out.
And that's what kind of snapped him out of it, was then he felt the pain in his head, and then he turned around and woke up essentially, and then it was all fake.
Man, I think I haven't seen it because I don't watch the show, but Rick and Morty did an episode like that where he goes into like a VR thing, and one of them who's like an awful. I think they're both awful, but I think it was the scientist guy or whatever. I don't know the show, but but it was that kind of thing. Like he went into this VR thing and was like actually like met somebody that he really liked and like fell in love and had this thing. And then his time runs out on the VR, like it's in an arcade. And something happens or he dies in there, but then he like takes it off and it's been like 15 minutes and he's like.
So have you guys seen the movie Inception?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so one of my favorite movies, but that's kind of the premise of that is you go into this dream state
that's right, and
time is expanded. So 1 hour in kind of level 1 is, it might be 3 days. It's like we have 3 days to accomplish this mission or whatever. But the interesting thing about Inception is if you die while in that, then it extends the time horizon. So then if you die, then you're in kind of dream level 2 where that same hour, it might be 50 years of your life. So with the movie, it's like he goes through and basically lives out his whole life, and then he finally wakes up, and they're still on the plane flight getting to where they were going. Like 50 years later, he wakes up, and it's only been a couple hours.
Goodness.
Yeah, you've seen Inception,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So, but so with worldview stuff, though, what... Like, because that messes with my brain.
I know it does.
Right.
Well, because I think there's a lot about the brain we don't know or understand. So,
well, like why?
Why is that camera upside down?
It's blurry.
This lamp is blurry.
Well, with that would be kind of crazy. You wake up 10 years from now and then you realize, oh, I've been dreaming this whole time.
Yeah,
What if this is a dream?
I know, that's the thing. Like, because that's what the Matrix kind of is, a little bit of that, but not really. Like, it's you're unconscious for 10 seconds and you've lived this life with this girl.
That's crazy.
So could he go up to her and be like, "Hey, I know this about you"? What?
Well, and I'm wondering if it was a real person in real life. Because, I mean, sometimes your dreams, you bring in kind of quote-unquote real people from your life. Yeah. But then other times you'll have people that don't actually exist.
Yeah, like the boy and the girl. Like,
yeah, those were kids. They're kids that they had. They didn't exist. Or did they?
But if he runs into a kid in real life,
like in Jumanji.
That's my child.
Which Jumanji?
The original Jumanji.
The Jumanji.
They're playing the game, and they have while they're playing the game, like the two kids that end up finding the game years later. Yeah. Then they go back and the game resets, and then they meet them later, and it's the same kids. It's like that.
Yeah, so things like that kind of break my brain. I'm like, I don't even know how to think about that.
Yeah, or why. I was like, why would... It goes back to the suffering question. Why would God allow that to happen? Yeah. But we've already talked about that. It was like, God doesn't necessarily... I mean, he does allow it to happen, but why?
Well, and the interesting thing with this story is, because in the podcast they talked a little bit more about it, and the host of the podcast, which is not the guy telling the story, said he had heard another story where there was a similar-ish situation, but what that guy ended up, he ended up being in a coma, and it was kind of like he was playing out a lot of this life, and I think he was in a coma for a couple of years, but in his kind of dream state or coma state, his dad died. So his dad, in the dream state, his dad died, but then he ended up coming out of a coma, and then his dad was alive again. So that was kind of like the reverse of it, but then he's like, but now you've already kind of experienced your dad dying, and now you're going to have to experience your dad dying again, probably.
Yeah. And so it's things like that would mess with your reality. Yeah. Because you're like, oh, I don't know what's true and what's not anymore. And so there's that show, I don't know if we talked about it here, called the Jury or Jury Duty.
Oh yeah, Jury Duty.
Where this guy was basically set up, and I haven't seen it. Do you watch it?
Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah, I did too. So the premise of it, is a guy that's on jury duty, but everybody else is
an actor, and
he doesn't know that. But I think you told me afterward he was had to go. I don't know if he had to go to therapy, but he's like, I don't know what's real and what's not, because everybody did such a good job of playing their roles that he was like, wait, is this real? And even when they're going to lunch and doing different things, it's like, wait, what's real and what's not? And so kind of with rehearsal too.
Yeah, the rehearsal, that was crazy. Have we talked about it on this podcast before?
Yeah, we have.
Not in depth.
We'll have to talk about it
The
again
rehearsal,
sometime.
we have.
No,
sure.
we haven't.
It's hard to describe.
But okay, well, hey, if you've made it this far, please subscribe because we've gotten several new listeners recently. So thanks for listening. Adrian got recognized this week out in public.
I
was
did.
like, hey, you're that girl on the podcast.
He's famous.
So famous.
So yeah, but leave us a. We earned your subscription, but no, we appreciate you guys watching and listening. We keep doing so. If you ever have suggestions for us,
We would love to watch or read or
movies or
something.
I'm
Listen.
I'm getting through a book that I'm excited to talk about once I finish it. But
The Bible.
What's the worldview of
The
that?
Bible. All right. Well, hey, I'm Chris,
I'm Adrian.
And I'm Jimmy.
and thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.